Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello and welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I am sitting with Kristi Spencer. Thank you so much for joining me, Kristi.
Thank you so much.
I'm really happy to have you here because we're discussing a topic that I feel has really kind of gone to the wayside, and that is manners and being polite. So let me introduce Kristi to you, and we can dive into this because I'm fascinated by this topic, and I'm really excited to talk to you. So Kristi Spencer is the founder of The Polite Company, an etiquette coaching service specializing in business, social, and dining etiquette. Kristi is a journalist and certified etiquette consultant. She is the graduate of the University of Kansas and the prestigious Emily Post Institute. The Emily Post Institute is the gold standard of etiquette training and has been promoting civility across the world for 100 years. Kristi is the exclusive etiquette instructor in the region who is trained by the Emily Post Institute. So congratulations on those accolades. That's wonderful.
Thank you very much.
So let's start with, how did you get into this industry? I mean, it's so niche. So I'm interested to know what drew you into it.
Well, I'd always had an interest in it, and that may have been spurred by living overseas and being in other cultures or seeing other cultures. But I also loved entertaining. But I was also a hiring manager in newsrooms for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And so through that, gaining leadership skills and development. And this just seemed like a natural thing that took everything that I was really interested in. And, it was a bucket list item that I wanted to take this etiquette class. And during COVID, I decided, let's do it. And then once I did it, I was just so excited to be part of a community where the whole idea is to make people's lives better and to help relationships. And, sometimes etiquette has a bit of a PR problem. So people think that it's antiquated, or it's only for the wealthy, or it's only for formal occasions. And the truth is, we're using etiquette every day, all day long. Absolutely. And we might be using it well, or we might be using it not so well. But every interaction we have, we are, using the etiquette that comes with that situation.
Okay, interesting. So you came from journalism, where I'm sure you've dealt with just all walks of life, coming in, whether they're being interviewed or you're talking to, you're setting up journalists to be on air, whatever the situation is. There's so many interactions with people. Do you find that they are better in circumstances like that, where the professionalism is turned up a notch?
I think that we all perform better when we're thinking about our actions than if when we're not really thinking about our actions. So anytime there is that added stress, whether, it's getting a job or it's having a camera focused on you, anytime you are aware of your actions, I think we're just naturally going to do a little bit better and act a little bit better than we necessarily have to.
Right. I would agree with that. So tell me a little bit more about when you go from journalism to the Emily Post Institute. So the Emily Post Institute is the gold standard. You're absolutely right. That is the one. So was it difficult to get into that program, and what were the steps that it entailed?
So this was a virtual program because, again, it was COVID. Traditionally, they would have people go to Burlington, Vermont, where their headquarters is, which I always wanted to do. And it's a fall class. So, fall in Burlington, Vermont, it wouldn't get any better. But that was going to not be so accessible for me because I had a full-time job and, being away for that time. So, so these were a series of modules where we learned over the internet, and there were videos that I watched. And then I met every week with my trainer, who was Daniel Post-Senning, who is Emily Post's great-great-grandson. And her 2 great-great-grandchildren run the Institute now. And it really is, it's a family-run business. And then you do feel like you are part of the Post family by the time that you've graduated. So it was just a wonderful experience.
That's incredible. I love that story because I feel like sometimes when we're taking a leap into a new area, it's so scary. But when you can feel like you're joining a network or part of a family, it definitely does soften that quite a bit.
Yes.
Well, good. So let's dive into etiquette because there's so much to know. Let's start with business. Obviously, this is a business-driven podcast. So let's talk a little bit about etiquette in business. So starting with the interview, what is great etiquette for an interview?
I think, you want to first be on time. And if that means checking out your destination a day ahead of time to make sure how long it takes you to get there. But no matter what, you don't want to be starting with an apology for being late. Right. So being there on time, is really important. And then I think that when you're in the interview, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So while there is a time for you to talk about your skills and what you can do in your background, there's even more time that you should be listening to what the company is wanting or what they're needing and what their culture is and values are. So I think that, really doing some active listening and then, asking questions, I think is great. Do your homework and know a little bit about the company. There's nothing that will impress them more than to find out that you took the time to go a little bit further than just showing up. And then I think, after the interview, and this is so, so important because I think people will go get a haircut. They'll spend money on a new outfit. They'll make sure that they look great, but then they won't spend 50 cents on a stamp to put on a thank you note. Right. So a handwritten thank you note. I know it sounds so old fashioned, but it is really important and it makes a fantastic impression. And they're not just for interviews. Anytime you have an opportunity or, something has happened or somebody has hosted you, write the thank you note.
Yes, I agree. Those are a really nice treat to get after an interview. But they happen very rarely. So,
and it can can really make the difference to somebody too. And an email and a thank you with an email is totally fine. Yes. Absolutely do that, but also follow it up with that handwritten one. No one is going to, count points off for somebody who thanked them too well or, too many times.
Right. I agree. That's wonderful. All right. So what about as the interviewer? So as the person doing the interviewing, what would be great etiquette for the interviewer if I'm hiring staff for my office, for example?
I think you want to set the tone by respecting somebody else's time and having some structure to the interview. So, you're going, companies aren't in the position that they used to be in where, it is difficult to find people to work and it's difficult to find good people to work. And so you have to be competitive. And so I think, being wise of someone's time and, of course, honesty is key to this. There's 3 principles of etiquette and one of them is honesty. So I think you really want to be honest with the person as well. And if you come from a genuine place, then you act sincere and people will trust you. And when people trust you, they want to do business with you or work with you. So I think that honesty and sincerity is the number one thing to keep in mind.
All right. Yes, I agree. So I do a lot of interviewing with my company, or I used to. Now I have a recruiter, but I just hired a young lady for my office, and it was a very easy hiring decision. The reason is because she, of the 10 people we sent interview requests too. We gave them the option. You can do a Zoom interview or you can come in person. She's the only one who chose to come in person. Of the Zoom interviews, some of them looked like they were prepared. Others looked like they were not prepared at all. They weren't, really sitting down in front of a screen that, they were off doing things. Like this was just something else in their day and they're multitasking while they're doing an interview. Totally not okay. But she came in, she looked great. She was in a beautiful suit. She was well put together. She was prepared. She had a copy of her resume. I mean, she just checked all the boxes, everything she did exactly right. And she followed it up with a thank you letter. So, I mean, it was a slam dunk for her. I mean, she was so far above and beyond her competition at that point that it was an easy decision.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. So, and as a hiring manager, it makes you level up your game. It makes you say, oh, okay, we're back to this now. We're doing this again, because Zoom, I think, created this laziness about us, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So it actually felt great to have somebody show up in a suit, look good, be prepared. And, it makes you say, oh, good. This feels good. This feels the way it should be.
Those are fine. Yeah. And those are not difficult things to do. They're fairly easy.
Absolutely.
But then, they add up. And like you said, she was far and away the best choice for you. So I think when people say, should I send a thank you note? And I say, only if you want the job.
Yeah. And, that's great. Yes, absolutely. So you talked about is it the pillar or the principles, the 3 principles? So tell me what that is.
So the 3 principles are consideration, respect, and honesty.
Okay.
And so those are what every rule is based on. And so for me, if etiquette doesn't have one of those behind it, then I don't teach it. So if it's, it used to be people thought they should put their pinkies out when they, drink tea. Well, that serves no purpose. And so, that is not a part of etiquette for me, or really for anybody who teaches etiquette. That's something you see in cartoons.
Right.
But anything that, a lot of that antiquated old etiquette that really didn't serve a purpose, or we just don't have that level of formality anymore, isn't something. But, you can always go back to consideration, and, that's thinking about other people and having empathy and, kind of deciding what your options are. And then you have respect, which is, okay, how in this interaction, something's going to happen. And then are you going to feel good at the end of it, or are you going to feel bad at the end of it? And, always choosing the option that makes that person feel cared for and feel respected. And then honesty is the last one, which is the most important one, because you can do the first 2, but if you do it in a sarcastic way or it's not sincere, you've done more harm than good.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's great. I really love those principles because I think they apply in so many aspects of life. But yes, etiquette for sure. So tell me a little bit about in the office environment. Are there things that we could be doing to show etiquette in an office environment, or is there poor etiquette that we could be stopping?
Well, I'll give you a quiz here.
Okay.
So what do you think the number one complaint is among coworkers when it comes to etiquette?
Gossip, I would say, or loud conversations.
Yes. Number one is people talking too loudly on their cell phones on the phone. That's number one. Gossip is a close second. Okay. And, the one thing about gossip is that's one that can get you fired. I mean, there are people who get fired for that. So that's a biggie. So in the office, taking care of shared spaces is important. I say if you have the ability to put it in the office fridge, you have the ability to take it out of the refrigerator as well. So the shared spaces can sometimes be tricky, but I think that personal space and people who are constantly interrupting somebody, that's a big one. So even if you're working in a cubicle, you have to keep in mind, pretend that those are walls and ask for somebody's permission and time before you enter their space. Personal calls and texts should have a really, we're not going to avoid them. They're going to happen, but the calls need to be taken out in another room, and texts really need to be kept to a minimum, because even if you're not making noise and you're not, people don't necessarily know who you're texting and that it's a personal thing, they do know, because they can just tell that you're not present in your conversation or with the work that you're doing. So I think those are also things to take really good care of. And being civil to one another. As the little things of, returning calls, returning emails, not interrupting people. All of these things can, add up in a person's day. And one or two of these things happen, and somebody's had a pretty bad day after they've encountered that incivility over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about, it's been, we've definitely evolved over the past 100 years. There were many things that were not in existence back when Emily Post wrote these standards, such as social media and cell phones. So how has the Emily Post Institute really taken that into consideration in, evaluating these rules?
There's hardly any lesson that we teach that does not encompass cell phones or include cell phones in some way.
Really?
From meeting etiquette, we talk about cell phones. Dining etiquette, we talk about cell phones. But in general, just having people control their cell phones and not letting the cell phones control them. This is a tool. Cell phones aren't bad. It's the way that we use them that can be bad. So I think you want to, really take care when you could disturb somebody, or you could disturb an activity. Put your phone on silent and, don't let that disturb. I have my phone on silent all the time, just because interruptions are difficult for me to kind of recover from. And so if my phone rings, then I'm on my phone for 20 minutes and forget. So I have my cell phone on silent. That might work for some people. But I think that really being aware that, this thing, technology can get in the way at, it's at family meals, it's at meetings, it's when you're having a conversation with somebody else. You've been there when you're having a conversation with somebody and all of a sudden, they're looking at their cell phone. And then, what do you do?
Right.
So we always want to pay attention to the person that's in the room with us. That's the person who takes priority.
Yes, I agree. I am guilty of one thing that I don't know, and I'm going to ask you because you'll be able to tell me if this is accurate or not. I don't like to take phone calls during the day unless it's scheduled. And the reason is because if I'm focused on something, whether I'm, writing or I'm sending an email or I'm doing invoices or whatever that, whatever the task is, if the phone rings and I have to take that call, I don't get back to what I was doing at the same pace for about 30 minutes. It takes about 30 minutes to re-engage at the same pace and focus that I was before. So I don't take phone calls. Is that rude or not rude? I don't know.
It is not rude to not take phone calls. I think there's really not an expectation when we call somebody that they're going to answer the phone.
Okay.
I mean, none of us are stunned or shocked or should be when we get somebody's voicemail. So I think that leaving a voicemail is fine, or just sending a text. But the key is then to listen to the voicemail or read the text before calling somebody back. Sometimes we think, oh, well, I'll just call them back. Well, they take the time to leave the voicemail, and it does really expedite the conversation if you go ahead and you listen to the voicemail to see what they said.
Okay. All right. I like that. I can do that. Okay. So yeah, because I've always wondered, like when I tell people, please don't call me unless we have it scheduled, because it's just, and sometimes I feel like that's being rude, but I also know that my focus is way diverted when I take these random calls that come in. I almost get more agitated than what they deserve on the phone. So it doesn't usually go well.
Well, and when you recognize that about yourself, that's great. And I don't think that anybody could hold that against you, especially when you deliver it in a way of, oh, I'd love to talk, I'd love to set up a time to talk with you. And, really kind of putting that out there from the beginning. So that's the expectation. I think you're in good stead there.
All right, fine, good. So let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about etiquette in dating, because I am single and I have gone on, dates over the past 5 years, and I am shocked most of the time at the poor etiquette on a date. And I am not perfect by any stretch, but I'd love to hear some dating etiquette.
So, this is going to go back to the cell phones, of course. So when you're on a date, and especially when you're eating with somebody, the cell phone is in a pocket. It's in a purse. It's not even on the table. This is not even if you get the most perfect sandwich, do not take a picture of it and send it to Instagram. You are on the date, not your phone. So, of course, we have to reference phones. But I think, too, you really want to take care in how you speak to other people, because there's nothing more telling in a person than how they treat other people. And so I think you want to, that's a big red flag, is to make sure you go out of your way to treat, the server and people you come into contact with in a kind way. And hopefully that's not an act for the person, but it's just kind of a reminder for them. And I think, being present, the topics of conversation, I think, are something you want to take care with. We're not going to talk about religion, politics, money, or past relationships on a first date. These are things that you don't want to get into. And it's not that we were not going to do that later and make connections, and, it's not going to be superficial. But on that first date, and you're presenting the best version of yourself, those topics are off the table. So, I think you want to be interested in the other person, ask questions, listen to them a lot, like our interview etiquette, because we are kind of interviewing somebody in that position. But, and I think, always, just wanting to make that person feel cared for and special is something that is really important.
Okay, wonderful. Well, this is great, helpful information. So we talked a lot about cell phones and, how they can be perceived as, a distraction or rude at times. So at the dinner table, I am an advocate of no cell phones at the dinner table ever. So my son and I have dinner together every night that he's here, and no cell phones. Like, they're not even allowed to come to the table. But I feel like that's becoming more commonplace for people to be on their cell phones at dinner, even if they're with their families.
It is. And I think that your rule is wonderful. That's what we need to do. There's actually an organization that promotes this. It's called the Family Meals Movement. And they promote eating as a family and having it be device free. And so that's where I come in, is, the device free part of it. I think it starts when they're so young. And the reason kids start using technology at the table is because their parents are using it to keep the child entertained while the food comes. And so then it just becomes something, then it's the child's own cell phone that they're going to be using at the table. And I think it's so dangerous, because there's so many great things that happen around a dinner table and learning moments. So, learning some patience, learning to have conversations, talking about our day. Sometimes you can create little rituals about, tell me about the best part of your day. And everyone does that, or conversation starters. I think that there is research that shows how much healthier children are who have regular meals. And this is from their own self-respect and self-worth and how they feel, to their eating habits. There's just so much evidence that shows that this is so important to do. And sometimes you can integrate technology if you're all watching a video and commenting on it and what it was, or it's not a hard and fast no. But I think that just the rule that there's just no technology at the table. We at our house, we've done this with our kids to where my 16-year-old will be the first one to turn off the television when it's time to eat, because that's just how, it is at our house. And it's just never been any other way. And if somebody does bring a phone to the table, it's usually me, because I feel like I need to get some work done. And I am quickly told, that there's no phones at the table and to put it away. But I'm just so glad that he calls me out on that. So I think, but if parents could do one thing for their kids, and this is something that is free, this is an easy, hopefully easy thing to do.
Right.
It doesn't cost any money, and the payoff is huge.
Yeah, I agree with you. The other thing that I have found is that kids who don't have cell phones at the table, who have to interact with adults and their family members, and they are better socially adjusted. I run across so many kids who kind of like fold when they have to talk to an adult, because, they spend 90% of their time in their bedroom, on a video game, on a phone, like just away from human interaction, really. And so when they have to actually talk to somebody, especially an adult, they just don't know what to do. So having that confidence to be able to hold a conversation without technology there is a huge life skill. And I would have never thought that was a life skill before. But seeing the kids now,
absolutely it really is. It is.
Yes. So, I mean, life, you think that's something that, we grew up with. Of course, you can have a conversation with anyone who talks to you. Of course, you can have a conversation with an adult, but the kids these days, it's not that way. A lot of them
It's very tough.
They're very nervous.
Yeah. The anxiety can be really, really huge. And, a lot of kids who do have anxiety about eating in public. And, one part of that is that they're afraid they're going to be called out for doing something incorrectly. And then the other part is that they don't want people watching them eat. Yeah. They just feel very anxious about that. And we can't let that happen to our kids.
Right.
I mean, we owe them to teach them the rules that will give them confidence at the table. And they're pretty easy rules to follow, but man, they are so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're talking about the dinner table, let's talk about that eating etiquette. And it's so important to have great etiquette at a table. I was a server for a lot of my time growing up. And so while I didn't have a lot of family dinners growing up, and I did end up learning etiquette from working in restaurants. So, but what can we teach people about etiquette at the dinner table?
I think, eating is inherently gross. We are trying to stab something on our plate, right. And then we're going to balance it to our mouth, and then we're going to pulverize it with, and then we're going to swallow it. And then we do that 30, 40 times in a meal. So I think that the number one thing I tell kids, and especially students, is ask yourself the question, is what I'm about to do going to gross somebody else out? And, start right there is, if I saw somebody chewing with their mouth open, or I saw somebody who blew their nose at the table, or I recently got an example of somebody asked me about flossing your teeth at the table.
Wow.
I'm like, okay. Yes, do that right after you clip your toenails.
Right. That's disgusting.
So gross. So I think, that's the overall picture, is try not to gross other people out. And then, knowing that the small fork that's on your left side, that's on the outermost, is for your salad. And then you have your entree fork, and you have your knife and your spoon. Knowing just those basics, knowing which is your bread plate and which is your drink, so you don't get it mixed up with somebody else. Those are easy to teach, and then really set you up for 90% of the meals that you're going to come into contact with. And, the biggest thing is, if you don't know what to do, just sit and watch what somebody else does. And I think people, do have that anxiety that people are going to look at them and correct them. Really, everybody who's at that table has that same anxiety. And even if you teach etiquette, especially if you teach etiquette, do you have that same anxiety that everybody else does of trying to do everything perfectly? And so, keep in mind, people really aren't watching you as much as you might think that they are. So I think it's great to invest in a book or a video, or, go to YouTube, go to TikTok, go to my Instagram, go to those kinds of things and learn those basic rules. And then once you know those rules, you can kind of do them automatically and then connect with the person at the table. And so building that relationship over a meal is your biggest task, is that's what you're really there for.
When we do my company, we provide servers a lot for different weddings and special events. So sometimes we'll do food service. And so I teach food service to my employees, but really what I'm teaching them is etiquette, how, which way to place a plate and which way to remove it. But I tell everybody, I have to use these little keys, on like, I want them to know that this is easy, right? And so I'm like, etiquette is not hard. You don't have to memorize a lot. It's pretty simple. So you eat from the outside in on the silverware, correct? So the soup spoon, the salad fork are on the outside, and then the inside is the entree knife and the entree fork, and then on the top is the dessert. So it should be simple. So I try to keep it as simple as possible for when I'm training my employees, but also when I'm teaching my son. I had him setting the table. And then with bread and drink, I always use the B and the D. Have you ever done that? So you just put your
You're
fingers
stealing
up.
my material.
I'm
Angela.
sorry. So we always do the B and the D. And so I always tell everyone, if you're watching the video, you can see us doing this, but you make a B with your left hand and a D with your right hand. And it's basically two okay signs. And that's how you know which is your bread and which is your drink side. So you can be the one at the table who knows, because everybody else is looking and wondering. But yes, I think that, there's a lot to be said with dining etiquette and, getting through a great meal. When you have the opportunity to go to a really nice restaurant and have a great meal, especially if that meal is with clients or, somebody who, it's an interview, it's somebody that you're trying to impress. You want to know that dining etiquette.
Yes, it makes the meal go more smoothly. And then you really can think about the people around the table and the purpose for being there, and not questioning, oh my gosh, what's coming next and what, utensil am I going to use?
Right. Yeah. Taking the nerves out of anything allows you to relax and be more yourself. So tell me some other etiquette that maybe we miss on a daily basis, just, in daily life. What can we be doing to be more considerate to others?
Well, there's just these magic words that we talk about through the Emily Post Institute. And, please is a great one.
Yes.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm sorry. These are all things that we need to remind ourselves of in situations. I think that, holding the door, and people will say, should men still hold the door for women? And I said, yes, everybody should hold the door for somebody else, no matter who's older, younger, female, male. We should just hold the door for other people. That's the nice thing to do. We give compliments and make sure they're genuine. But, the way you can turn somebody's day around with a, compliment is just amazing. And that makes them feel as good as you do by giving it. So I think we really need to focus on others and have empathy. We have had so much stress in our lives over the last 3 years. I mean, we've every corner, whether you were in a newsroom or you were in a restaurant or you were in the medical field. I mean, everybody was, really pushed to the point of, and we looked so inward when we're stressed and we're not really looking at people around us and thinking about their needs and how we can help them when you're looking at yourself. And so I am encouraging everybody, stop looking at yourself, start looking at other people and thinking how you can impact them in a positive way. Because again, it doesn't just work to help them out, it helps you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. And giving grace, I feel like over the past couple of years, if we could have learned anything, it's please give grace. You have no idea what somebody's dealing with.
Yeah. And I talk about, kind of the measuring stick, how much, when I'm late to something, what goes through my mind is that, I had to do this and I lost my keys and then I had to walk the dog in the rain. I had to do all these things. But then when somebody else is late, what am I thinking? I'm thinking, well, they don't really respect me or they're always late. And, so help me if they walk in with a coffee from Starbucks that, delayed them. And so, we're using two different yardsticks to measure ourselves and others. And if we can ease up on that and give people, the same breaks to them that you would give for yourself, it's a game changer.
Absolutely. So tell me, who inspires you?
Well, my mom inspires me. She is the most gracious person. She's a wonderful host. She's lived all across the world and has always had a wonderful group of people. I don't think she's met a stranger, and she's certainly, once she's met them, they're her friend. And so, she really inspired me to kind of go through life trying to make it better for other people.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Very nice. So if your mother is inspiring you and traveling around the world and doing all of these amazing things, is that where you get your kind of that perspective of, how can we treat other people better and what can we do here in the US and to raise that level up of, how we treat others and how we respect them.
And I really started this because I wanted to have the confidence and I wanted to make myself feel good.
Yeah.
And have that positivity in my life. Right. But then what I learned was, oh my gosh, it's amplified because now I can do it for others. And if I can bring that to others and I help people, feel more confident in social situations where I'm not really very good at networking, so we'll have a couple classes over networking and then I'll take them, to an event where we're networking. And when we're done and they're, have learned something from that. And I know that they're probably going to teach it to somebody else. I love that. And so where I thought that this was going to be me, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn the rules. It's not at all. It's, it, turned into something else where my passion is now teaching it to others.
Oh, I love that. I love it. That's wonderful. So, question that I ask on every podcast. So as women, we often give our power away, and that could be something as simple as taking a criticism and not responding to it, or giving someone else credit for work that we did, or giving the accolades away, even though some of that credit goes with, to us. Have you given your power away? And I'm sure you have, because as women, we do this all the time. So tell me about a time that you gave your power away, and then tell me about a time that you stepped into your power.
I think, with giving your power away, we are prone to doing that, especially if, our boss is a male. And so sometimes when I feel very passionately about something that you just won't push it because you're afraid to speak up. Right. And I think that if I was in that situation now, I could do it differently, because what I have learned is being polite doesn't mean that you're a doormat. Yes. It doesn't mean that you're always saying yes. It doesn't mean that you're saying yes to every invitation. It is being able to set boundaries in a considerate respectful, and honest way. And so sometimes the news that we need to give people isn't positive, but it's the way that we give it to them that can really help. And so the etiquette has really helped me with that.
Yeah.
And, I think daily when you're, trying to, decline an invitation to a party and knowing how to do that, that gives you power, because that's power over your time.
Yes.
And I think being able to do those things are things that I do much more easily than I used to.
I love it. So give me an example of what that looks like when you decline an invitation or where you set boundaries in a considerate way. Can you give me an example of that?
I think if you don't want to do something that you're asked to do, this is the 5th bake sale in a row that somebody's asked you to participate in. I think you can just, you want to take a minute to consider the ask. So a quick yes is probably something you're going to regret, and a quick no is not going to help the relationship with the person. So, taking a little time. And then I think that you can just come back to the person and say, unfortunately, I don't have time to take that on, or I wouldn't be the best person to do that right now. And then you can kind of give them a little bit of a time frame. If it's, but if you have one in a couple months, I'd love to help out. Or you shut that door with, I'm not a baker, so I'm just not the person you're going to want to ask to do that. And, and then I think people will try to change your mind.
Right.
And so at that point, your job is just to listen and empathize and say, I can see you're in a bind. Boy, that's really tough when you have to ask people to do that. And then just listen. And sometimes just listening is really the best thing for it, is just to listen to them. But I think those are kind of the steps to saying no, but you haven't hurt the relationship by saying no.
Yeah, I love that. I love that setting boundaries allows you to take your power back, because you're so absolutely right about that. I love that so much. So what advice would you give to 18-year-old you?
I would probably take more chances. And, I grew up and it was, I was a rule follower. And so went to high school, went to college, got a job in a field, stayed in that field for 25 years. And, I don't think kids are doing that now. I think that they are getting more varied experience. But for me, it was, once you get a job and that's a good job, boy, you stick with that job. And, just, whether you like it or not. And so I think that I would have said, always be willing to pivot and move, and don't be so afraid, and, understand that your skills are varied and you can fit in a lot of places, and you don't have to just be in one place. So.
Absolutely. Good. Great advice. So with all that you've accomplished and as far as you've come and you've pivoted in your career and you've done, exactly what you just said, and just, you took that chance, what do you wish more people knew?
That's such a good question. I wish more people knew that etiquette is not something to be scared of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not an old word. And I think that we try to, zhuzh it up with other, ways to call it, but it is etiquette. And whether that sounds old and like you're clutching your pearls or, whatnot, embrace that word, because it's a good word. And I think that I wish more people would not be afraid of exploring it, and certainly using it in their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for all of that incredible insight. This has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking with you. So, Kristi, any final thoughts?
No, I think I just encourage people to be kind to one another, think about other people, and really take a look at how you're impacting the situation around you, and what you could do to make that situation better.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, Kristi Spencer, it has been such a pleasure talking to you.
You as well.
Thank you. So I'm really glad we had you on today. We just wrapped up a series on health and wellness, and I feel like this is a really good segment to kind of go into, to kind of end that, because while health and wellness, I feel are, we're not talking about just internal and external, bodily, areas. We're also talking about mentally, and confidence comes from etiquette, from having great etiquette and knowing that, you can sit down at a dinner table or interact in any situation and feel confident. That's also a part of health and wellness. So thank you for that. So I have really enjoyed our talk today. That is the end of our segment. And I hope everyone goes to prettypowerfulpodcast.com and checks out Kristi Spencer and all of her amazing information. Her bio is there. Her links to her website are there. Please do follow her. And I think you'll gain even more insight. So thank you again, Kristi.
Thank you.
All right, everybody have an amazing day, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time. And until then, step into your own power.